pond to England. I'm sorry, from Ireland. Take it away, Matt.
For sure, for sure. Before we dive in, a little bit about myself, Matthew. I'm recently in the Teams org. My kind of role at Microsoft is I work across many different teams, whether that's Teams, the rest of the M365 suite, Azure Active Directory, Intune, to make sure that we can, as the title of this slide says, empower frontline workers with Microsoft technology. And what we've learned is one of those biggest challenges is around shared mobile and desktop devices. So let's go ahead and dive in. My team's kind of vision statement, our goal for all of you on this call is to make sure that we can empower all of our frontline workers, especially in the healthcare space, to be connected, more productive, and ultimately achieve more with less, right? And so we've built products within Microsoft Teams to obviously be connected, right? You can chat, you can have meetings. We have a walkie-talkie feature, a bunch of really great technology there. More productive, so we have a task suite. We have the Microsoft portfolio to help you accomplish what you need to get done, and then ultimately achieve more. This also kind of bleeds into the admin, the IT persona, helping you have the tools to deploy these technologies with as little pain as possible. Before any of this to really work, we need to make sure that the devices that the frontline workers use easily plugs in with the technology that we offer, and is easy enough for folks to use their own identities on these devices. Now, in this pictures, all these devices are Windows devices, but we know that a lot of folks are also using Android, and within healthcare, iOS quite a bit. Now, the unique challenge with shared devices, which is the focus of this conversation, is you have these gaps, right? A person starts their shift, they use a device for a bit. In a lot of cases, maybe within their shift, they either are jumping between different rooms or they're doing different tasks, and so they constantly have to log out or lock the device so that the next person that touches that device can easily authenticate and get in and do their work, right? And that handoff needs to be as seamless as possible, and it needs to be incredibly secure. And I'm sure all of you can appreciate in the healthcare space just how important is security and customer data and these apps are to make sure that the next person doesn't have access to that information. And so what Microsoft has been doing, especially within the mobile space, is we have built a technology within Azure Active Directory called Shared Device Mode. And what it does in the mobile space, so we're talking about iOS and Android right now. If y'all are interested, we can broaden this out to Windows in a bit. But within Android and iOS, where there aren't these operating system accounts that you can easily switch across, we have layered in that technology into Azure Active Directory, and more specifically the Authenticator app. So as a user with a device in shared device mode, I can easily sign in. So I sign in once, and then all of the other applications on the device will automatically sign in without touching any buttons. Really critically, easy sign out. You sign out of one app and a broadcast signal goes to the rest of the applications and signs you out so that the next person doesn't have access to your data. And then the last feature that comes with shared device mode is conditional access. Previously, before shared device mode, a device always had to be registered with a human, with a specific person, which doesn't make sense if a device is being shared with multiple people. And so with this mode, the device actually gets registered as a userless device, so that you can write the correct conditional access policies for those devices. Okay. Now, all of this is kind of like theoretical, and you can start imagining in your head. I find it's really confusing unless you can see what the actual experience looks like end to end. So what I have up on the screen right now is a demo I'll be showing you of shared device mode end to end. This is a Android demo, so I can also kind of show off manage home screen, which doesn't exist in iOS. What I would encourage y'all to do, since I know in healthcare, iOSs and iPhones iPads are more popular in this space, is kind of just imagine instead of manage home screen, you're signing into Teams first, or you're signing into M365, or maybe one of your LOB apps first. And then afterwards, you can see what the automatic sign-in process looks like. Alrighty. And I see we just had our first question in the chat. I'll get to that in a bit. If you have questions about what you're about to see or have already seen, please put in the chat. I'd love to answer questions as we go. And I typically get a lot of questions after playing this demo. Alrighty, so let's get started. So what you're seeing right now on the screen is this manage home screen feature, which, as I mentioned before, is only on Android right now. The user can click on this big ol' sign-in experience. And what you're going to be seeing is kind of vanilla authentication right now. You put in your username and password. Manage home screen also has this feature called PIN, so you can easily get back in, kind of re-auth. Nothing earth-shattering yet. But once we get to the second application that integrates with shared device mode, that's where the magic happens. That's where the automatic sign-in is going to start showing up. So the user clicks on Teams. We're seeing a bunch of loading screens. We have work to like smooth this out and make sure that it's easier and faster. But what you're not seeing is a user having to click on any buttons, put in a username and password. All of that authentication is now happening in the background, in front of the user automatically, so that they can get to their chats, meetings, tasks, whatever it might be, as quickly as possible, right? And so we can see the same thing with Outlook, checking like who's authenticated, right? I'm in the shared device mode, so I'm not going to ask a person to add an account or sign in. No, I'm just going to automatically do it for the user, so that in this case they can access their emails. So really, it seems obvious, but a lot of blood, sweat, and tears across Microsoft went in to make this possible. And then lastly, what most of y'all really love or want or need is the sign out capability. So in this particular demo, the user signing out of manage home screen, but what you might have also noticed is in both the Outlook and Teams applications, what we have done is up-leveled the sign out button to make it more discoverable, right? So as a nurse, I can go to the hamburger menu, and instead of having to hunt around in the settings gear and figuring out how to sign out, there's a big sign out button I can click. And if we look at Microsoft Teams, same idea. We even made the button red, right, to make it really easy for folks to sign out. And as I mentioned previously, they'll send out a broadcast mechanism to tell all the applications as soon as you can, kick off a sign out. So I want to take a pause there, and I'll start addressing some of the questions in the chat. And if you have questions about what you've just seen, please put it in the chat. Okay, so Thomas first asked, I'm doing this with Jamf, setup and reset with SSO. Yes, so a lot of our MDM friends like Jamf and VMware, they have some technologies that kind of help with this. We have noticed some customers having challenges with those technologies because they don't either clear everything up, or if you do need to clear everything up, it requires uninstalling and reinstalling everything. So there's like deficiency there. I'll get to it in a bit, but we are working with MDMs like Jamf so that they can actually take advantage of this technology so that their existing solution just gets even better. Okay. Ryan asks, I'm talking to a healthcare provider about this exact issue. How can nurses sign in and out of devices while walking around the floors? Great. Hopefully this can be part of your conversation and the rest of what we're talking about in the next few slides. And then Thomas asked, does signing out of the global sign out of the MHS experience in this active user session do a global sign out of Outlook, Teams, etc.? It does. If we get a little bit technical, what actually happens is the user signs out, and I mentioned there's a broadcast signal that goes out. If the app is awake and in the foreground, or it's doing some background process that it's awake, it can receive that signal and instantly start kicking off a sign out process. That can't be guaranteed though on these mobile devices. That might be asleep or been terminated or what have you. And so what we will do as Microsoft or as one of these apps integrated with shared device mode is as soon as that app does wake up, it will always check before showing any information to the user who is currently signed in. And if that person is different or there's no signed in user on the device, it'll instantly kick off a sign out and clear all of that data. Okay, great questions, great questions. Alrighty. And then one last question before we move on. Would love to see this. They use the Volta platform, iOS, and previously had not to push out in the M365 apps. A huge disconnect for clinical staff to see some apps, but not their email teams. Yes, agreed. Yeah, and we're hoping this can help that bridge that divide. And Gordon asked, does the app have to be installed, or the apps, or do the apps person needs follow their profile? The apps need to be installed. So what I would recommend is if you have an MDM like Jamf, Intune, VMware, you would install these apps preemptively on these shared devices because they should all be managed devices. And are there any prereqs for shared devices? Is Intune required? Let's actually, I think that is a good segue into the next slide. We've had some challenges, to be frank, in Microsoft land. So this is a feature that we've had for a little bit over a year. For Android, for iOS, it's still been coming. And as kind of mentioned, what are some of the prereqs? Historically, we at Microsoft have required or needed, frankly, for customers to use Intune as the MDM. And we know that's unrealistic to expect customers with thousands, if not tens of thousands of devices to just say, oh, well, I'm just going to move over to Intune, right? That's a huge monumental effort. And so what we at Microsoft have been doing is working with MDMs like VMware and Jamf and SODI to help them use our APIs, use shared device mode so that they can get the same abilities. And so we'll talk about that in a bit and where our progress is. And then two, not all apps have historically supported it. So this summit is all about Teams. Teams is kind of always first to finish it, since we know just how important frontline workers are. And so I'll be sharing where we're at with Teams and what the roadmaps look like for other Microsoft applications. And then if I were to add a third kind of challenge, it's that those subsequent sign-ins all get automated, but that first sign-in can still be too difficult for some frontline scenarios, putting in that username and password. I know in the healthcare space, y'all have Imprivata, and if any of y'all have been tracking kind of what they've announced at HIMSS, they have actually integrated with shared device mode to make that badge tap-in experience even easier. Okay. Alrighty, so in terms of MDMs, this is where you'll probably start seeing a theme, and that theme is Android is about a quarter or two ahead of where iOS is, but it's a good kind of beacon, a good signal of where we're headed with iOS, because we're all kind of doing the same things. So on Android land, we've been working really closely with VMware and SODI. Those are the main MDMs in that space. VMware is currently in public preview, and the next couple months will be GAing their integration with shared device mode. What that means is if you have devices managed, Android devices managed by VMware, you'll be able to deploy them as shared device mode enabled devices, and all that automatic sign-in stuff will work. VMware has their own version of managed home screen, their own app launcher that has a sign-in experience. That too is being integrated with shared device mode. And then SODI, they're also a player in Android land. They have some private previews, and they're planning on GAing in September. Both of these companies have publicly kind of announced this, and so you can find those in their public blogs. Okay. So that's Android land. I don't have any slideware on it, but I will speak to iOS since I know that's very prevalent in the healthcare space. So in iOS land, Microsoft is frankly still working on the compliance APIs that we give to MDMs like VMware, like SODI, like Jamf to integrate. Those are expected to be done by the end of this first half of this calendar year. At that point, we'll be giving it to Jamf and VMware so that they can integrate. I like to joke Jamf is our like hungriest customer for these APIs, and so while we don't have formal agreements or timelines on when they'll integrate, just by the eagerness they have for integrating with shared device mode, I would expect their timelines to be fairly quickly. So by end of year, hopefully we'll have something. And since we already have a pretty good engagement with VMware, we actually met with them yesterday about the iOS APIs. Hopefully they adopt fairly quickly as well. Okay. So that is our third-party MDM story. I'm going to take a pause there and kind of go back to the chat, the questions to see if there's anything new before going into what are the timelines, what does the support look like for the actual applications. Okay. Would the share device process work with Authenticator Lite for Outlook as well? Authenticator does need to be installed on the device. If you're for Outlook Lite, I have to follow up. I think if I remember correctly, we don't have support yet. But don't quote me on that. I think the plan is to eventually get that support, since we know that in the frontline space, having support for low-powered devices is really important. And then Thomas asks, he's in the private preview of shared device mode on iOS with AD. It's pretty good. Hopefully Microsoft realizes the value of sign in and out for FLW experiences, and hope that gets pushed internally soon, because I'm dying to have this capability for our organization. Yes. The main reason why we don't have a managed home screen experience like or on iOS yet is, frankly, iOS and Android. I'm sure you all know Android is a little bit more open. They have kind of like patterns for things like app launchers. iOS doesn't. Well, we've heard very, very loudly from customers just how much y'all want an experience like that on iOS. And so the iOS team in Intune is getting really creative, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way of providing a similar experience. Alrighty. App time, okay? So like before, I want to start with the Android story, just to kind of like show what's what a more mature side of the house looks like. So today we have Microsoft Teams and Managed Home Screen as GA, generally available, and that's been true since last fall, I think. The other core apps that most customers ask for, that's Edge, Yammer, Outlook, and Power Apps. They're all currently in public preview, and we're expecting them to GA in May, so next month. The other two applications that we hear customers needing most for their frontline workers on these shared devices are Power BI and the Office suite. So think Word, PowerPoint, Excel, SharePoint, OneDrive. So on the Office side of the house, they're currently in progress. Both iOS and Android, they're planning on private previewing sometime in the summer. So hopefully by the end of the calendar year, we can say GA, yay. For Power BI, I successfully just secured funding for them. They plan on starting work during the second half of this year. So hopefully that gives you a sense of timelines in that space. In the meantime, if you really, really need those applications, what I really like about having Edge as an app that's about to GA is it's a really good release valve. If you use Edge and you sign into it as a frontline worker using shared device mode, any web app that you open up in Edge that uses MSOL, Microsoft's Authentication Library, will get that automatic sign in and automatic sign out experience effectively for free. So what that means is, yes, it's a good unblock for Power BI and Office. But what that also means is it's a really good unblock for any line of business apps that you have that are currently web-based. Okay. Alrighty. If you do have some custom apps that are native natively running on Android. We do have publicly documented APIs on how you can get that same automatic sign in and automatic sign out capability. Code always looks scary, but it's not that bad. I've seen quite a few customers actually successfully go through this process. Okay. So that's the Android side of the house. I suspect you are more interested in iOS. So let's go ahead and dive into iOS land. So I think was it Thomas mentioned they're already in the public preview for Teams and Intune. So if any of you are interested in starting to play around with shared device mode, that is something that you can play around with today. To be frank, and we've heard this from our customers, it's really hard to test shared device mode with only one app. So we fully recognize that. And so we're working really hard to get that next set of applications available to customers like yourself so that you can really start to appreciate, see, test that automatic sign-in experience on iOS. So we also have Teams. We have these other applications coming. Yammer just recently shared with me that they're code complete, and they're actually going to be starting private previews next week. So if that's something that you're interested, work with your account teams, and we can try to get you in that. The other applications hopefully follow shortly afterwards. My goal for these applications and what we're looking at trying to hit is a public preview sometime in June. Things slip. I just want to put that caveat. So while I'm hoping that we hit June, it may be July before all these applications are public preview. And then I mentioned the timelines around Power BI and Office. What's nice there is they're doing them together, Android and iOS, so there won't be this kind of mismatch in timelines. They should land at the same time, both for Android and for iOS. Okay. So I want to take a pause in a bit on apps. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now so that I can answer them in a few seconds. Just like Android, we already have public documentation on how to integrate with shared device mode for your native iOS applications. And then lastly, this is kind of the money slide. This says all the dates. I apologize. They're all these dates are in Microsoft fiscal calendar year. Our fiscal starts in July. So everything is kind of like 2 quarters off from a typical calendar year projection. But what we can see here is those Android applications I talked about. They're all targeted for fiscal year Q4 for us, which is May. I mentioned those Unified Office Client and Power BI. They have similar timelines for both Android and iOS. And then we can see those other core iOS applications. Hopefully public preview lands in June. So I don't see any questions or comments about apps. That's great. My request is if you looked at these list of apps and you're like, well, one of the apps I most need just isn't on the list for Microsoft. Where is it? Please post it in the chat so that we can get that correctly prioritized. All right. And then what I'll also recommend is over on the Microsoft side, we've been going on this journey and we've realized that it's very hard because every customer has their own different setup. They're using different devices. They maybe have a different MDM. Their app needs might be different. They might have different sign-in expectations. And so it is frankly hard for me to kind of go into avenues like this and say, and this is everything that you need to know, because I suspect everyone's a little bit of special snowflake and will need some hand holding. Since this is kind of a new space, our goal, frankly, is to get our field and our account teams to be able to help you. But in the short term, if you need immediate help, we are starting these shared devices office hours that I'll be leading. Did we just call you a snowflake? Snowflake in the good sense, being unique and special. These office hours will be every other week on Wednesdays. If the times don't work for you, there's a spot in the form in this link that you can use to, we can kind of go back and forth. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more, use this form to sign up for the office hours within a day or two business days. We'll send you the calendar invite so that you can make sure you attend. Cool. Alrighty. Okay, so that is everything that I had to share with shared device mode. The next thing I kind of wanted to dive into is that first sign-in experience challenge that I talked about. But before I move there, I do want to take a pause. This might be an opportunity for folks to be able to come off mute, raise their hand to ask any questions that they have on shared device mode before we get into some of the simple authentication work that Microsoft is investigating. Okay. So I'm going to take a look at Thomas's question. And if anyone has a question that they would ask, want to ask over audio, now's your chance. Thomas asked, how do you see web custom URL clips working on shared device mode with their native browser? Is there a preference to run Edge on and for iOS and Android? So the difference, the very good question. The story is a bit different on iOS and Android. In iOS land, Apple provides, I forget what it's called. There's a way to like pass authentication to iOS Safari, and we can make that work. So web clips should just work in iOS. In Android, it's a little bit different story. There, we recommend folks to use Edge. So what our recommendation is in your MDM, like uninstall every other web browser that you can. And then what will happen is if you click on your web clip, it will open up the Edge browser, and then it'll kick off that shared device mode automatic sign-in flow. Okay. Great question. Okay, and as Jonathan mentioned, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions.
Yep, you can come off of mute and raise your hand and call you, and come on from mute and have an opportunity to ask questions to Matthew or discuss anything on the roadmap.
Yeah. Charles.
Hi, Matthew. We originally saw this in preview for my organization, and we have a fleet of TC Zebra devices. They're Android native devices, and they're enrolled with Workspace ONE UEM. And what we noticed was that sort of led to my question about, what are the prerequisites? And you said originally it was Intune. It had to be Intune managed to get it to kind of function correctly, but now there should be a public preview with VMware.
Yes. So since you are a VMware shop,
yeah. I mean, we're both, but these devices are in VMware.
Yeah, it is very common for folks. We've seen a lot of folks, they'll use Intune for their information workers, and they'll use VMware for their frontline, since they're frankly ahead in a few spots. So I might have to, on the side, look for the link. VMware has a website where you can go to see all of their active betas.
Right.
If you go there, basically there's an option there for shared device mode, and they have public documentation on how to get started. We've had a handful of customers actually go through it so far, and we've gotten some positive signals. If you run into any challenges, though, please let your account team know, and I can.
We also use their native. You mentioned briefly their native check and check out function, and that was going to be integrated as well as an option. So I really want to test both because we use the check and check out today. And when we first started using it with Teams, as you probably are aware, it was very clunky, and you had to go through like MFA every time you logged in, and it was just. It didn't work half the time to clear all the data. So anything that's been improved upon, definitely want to get on that beta as soon as possible.
I think this beta is built for you. That MFA kind of challenge that you were having as one of the values of having like conditional access being part of shared device mode. It is built to address that specific problem.
Okay, and my company has a good relationship with Microsoft, so I will definitely drop your name to our account representatives to say, look, if we need help getting this set up, and we need to coordinate with our technical account managers at VMware to get the beta, maybe we can get in the right direction, because I feel like I've been asking for 6 months and haven't really gotten what you're telling us today, which is great. So thank you.
So if anyone else is using VMware, they're great people. Since this is so new, though, what I found is a lot of their account teams are just not aware that this is a beta. It's available. They can test it out. And so we have frankly had to do some like escalations and pulling of strings to make sure that everyone's like, oh yes, this is a thing. We can test it out. We can unblock folks. So yes, feel free to leverage your Microsoft account team, myself, and we can help connect the dots. In a few months' time, when they've GA'd their solution and it's like publicly available, this shouldn't be an issue. But in this kind of like initial rocky phase, it might. Cool, great question. Any others? Otherwise, we can dive into simplified authentication. Alrighty, I feel like that was an awkward enough silence to jump to simplified authentication. So what we hear for folks in the front line is great. You automated sign in, but that first sign in's still not great. In the frontline space, you're typically having to type in a username and password for nurses that are jumping from like room to room to room on these shared devices. That it just doesn't work. And so what we at Microsoft have been doing is really cataloging what are the unique security challenges with the frontline. And what we've identified is there's like 5 key problems that we've been able to find. One, just like their information worker counterparts, they want a passwordless way of signing in. We all know kind of the risk of passwords floating around. So that's one. 2, full device support. So y'all want authentication methods that will work on Windows, iOS, Android. What y'all don't want is having an authentication that works on iOS devices that those same workers can't use elsewhere. 3, this might be less relevant in healthcare, but in manufacturing and retail, folks aren't really allowed to bring their personal devices with them, so use of the Authenticator app isn't really available. 4, MFA support's really critical. There's not a really fast and easy way of getting MFA on these shared frontline devices. And then lastly, relatively cheap. And I think this is something that healthcare is really interested in. You are using Improvat today, but it does come with some upfront costs. And so we don't have a final formal decision of like, we're building this and you can see it in a year. I would say we're getting very close. I had a review with one of my corporate vice presidents a couple of weeks ago, and I said, we really need this, and it looks like we're starting to get some traction there. But where y'all can help me is we have been starting to collect some more formalized data from our customers on what type of simplified authentication is acceptable and what are y'all using today. I know healthcare Improvat is kind of like the name of the game. I would love to know from this audience how much of that is true, if there's still willingness to use Improvat or if you're looking for other alternatives. And so I have a link on the screen. Y'all filling that out will be incredibly powerful, incredibly helpful to folks like myself, folks in identity and elsewhere inside of Microsoft, make the right decisions so that we build the right authentication method for frontline workers. We have like a few dozen participants right now, only like 1 or 2 in healthcare. And so y'all providing information will help us get a really good understanding of what are the authentication needs in Frontline. What I will call out on the screen, I kind of show the top ideas that we're currently running with, and we're just going to run through them real quick, just so that there's familiarity. First is something that we like to call QR plus PIN. Basically, you'd be able to print out QR codes, give them to your frontline workers so that they can put on a badge or inside of a locker or another secure place, maybe in their wallet. And a user would just take their device or use the camera on their computer to scan that QR code. A QR code would have a secret, so it can prove that they have something special on them. And then the PIN number that pops up next would help them prove something that they know. So that would allow us to provide very cheaply from Microsoft and from the customer's perspective a simple form of multi-factor authentication. So that's one thing that we're looking at. The second and third are very similar. They're slightly different, but you can think of them as physical tokens, your YubiKeys and FIDO2. In the pictures we're showing NFC, but you can also plug them in. Next, Imprivata. I hope everyone on this call is familiar with Imprivata. We're looking at potentially deeper partnerships with Imprivata and Microsoft. I think I mentioned earlier in the call that they've been working with us to integrate with shared device mode. Actually have a really great demo that they shared with us that's on YouTube. And if y'all haven't seen it, I'm going to go ahead and play it for y'all anyway, just so that you're aware of that level of integration. I'd love to know how many people are using that today, and if you are still interested in using it in the future. And then to round things out, not complete solutions, but we're also looking at how we can provide third-party multi-factor authentication solutions like Nuance Gatekeeper, which is voice authentication. And there's another company that does MFA through handwriting authentication. Cool, awesome stuff. And then flat username. So instead of having to type in Matthew at Contoso or Matthew at healthcare.com, you would just type in your username. Okay. Alrighty, so those are the options. It looks like Howard is testing ground control right now. Awesome. Love to hear it. And I'd love, Howard, for you to kind of fill out the form and kind of give your perspective on that experience. Okay. I don't see any other major questions for Simple Auth, but if you do, please put them in the chat. I'm actually going to share my desktop so that I can share with y'all the Imprivata ground control demo that integrates with shared device mode, and then we can open things back up for any remaining questions that y'all might have. Okay. Let's actually reshare so we can get some of that audio. Enable content, and then we'll present it again. Is it going to play? Demo gods, work for me, please. Okay, I'm gonna try one more thing, y'all. I really want y'all to see this.
Rolling. Okay. So I'm showing it.
Oh, okay. Share my screen, y'all. I'm gonna watch this video together.
Okay. So I'm showing you that the phone is locked here and the home button doesn't work, but so we have the phone in single app mode. Now I'll take a badge and I'll try and be Bob. We'll tap the badge to get a phone at the beginning of my shift. You can see that we've assigned the phone to Bob here. And what's new is that we have a button, sign into Microsoft. I'll click that. This will start the single sign-on profile. I can tap and then autofill the password. This comes from our OneSign product to autofill the password. And after I click go, it will sign into the Microsoft shared device mode on here. So when I tap on Teams, you can see Teams will leverage the same account, know that it's Bob, and be signed in. At the end of my shift, I just simply have to plug in the phone. I don't have to sign out from anything. The system recognizes the device, knows that Bob is signed in and will automatically sign out and lock the device again.
Awesome, awesome. When I first saw that demo, I was like, yes, this is the future. This is amazing. So if that's something that's interesting to y'all, that was just announced this week at HIMSS. iOS, I believe, is available today already, and then Android, they're working on it, and it'll be ready in the next month or two. Okay, I want to take a look at the comments. With FIDO2 key, will it sign the user out if the user walks away from the device? I think the answer is no, which is one of the big concerns. In Android land, we have a little bit more control with like timeouts and auto signing out. On iOS, we have less control with that, which is I think one reason why the Imprivata solution is so attractive. It takes kind of that guesswork out of signing out. You just put it back in the cradle, and then it locks down the device, deletes everything, puts it in a good state so that your data is secure. Okay, and then we see from Josh and Taylor some excitement about Imprivata's solution. So definitely reach out to your contacts with Imprivata if you're interested. Any other questions? That's all the prepared material that I have. We're way early, but I think that's okay. It's a Friday. So if we end early, I won't be upset. Hopefully y'all are upset. But I do want to make sure that you get all the time, all the value that I can provide you. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Please raise your hand.
Yeah, raise your hand, come off of mute, and go ahead.
Howard does ask a very, very good question. For existing devices that are already managed, do they have to be re-enrolled? Today with Intune for iOS and Android devices, the answer is yes. In Android land, I'm not sure about VMware, but I've heard rumors that SODI doesn't require you to re-enroll the device. And we're currently in conversations with VMware and SODI if they're going to require or not require re-enrollment for iOS. We aren't entirely sure. So worst case, kind of assume that you're going to have to re-enroll the devices, and maybe some of our third-party partners will provide an easier onboarding experience for your devices. Great question, Howard. Alrighty, well, if there's no more questions, I'll pass it back to Jonathan. I think he has a few wrap-up slides, but this has been great.
Yeah, super informative, Matthew. Appreciate that. And any questions, please come off of mute. I've opened up mute for everyone and gives everybody ability to jump off and ask any of those hard-hitting questions that we know that Matthew can handle. Softballs, easy ones, hard ones. Matt's got all the answers on devices and Frontline. So please, yeah, anything. Come on, this is your time. We've got a little bit of extra time before we go into some of the feedback and we don't have any more upcoming sessions. This is it, the last session of 9 sessions. Please, we need your feedback. Go ahead and click on the link. This is our survey. This is to know how we're doing and how we give back to the community. We love doing these events and can't do them without you. So if you've got a topic that you want to talk about or something that we've missed, like more information on Copilot or chat in Teams GPT and all kinds of other things that will be coming up, we're going to be putting that curriculum together for the fall, if not sooner, or if you want to catch up with us sooner, why not head over to the HLS Community Connection and join? So all you do is click on the registration link, or simply take out your phone and hit the QR code, sign up. We do 30 minutes once a month, all types of topics. So topics that were coming from you. We're most likely going to do some co-pilot, Jonathan. What do you think? Everybody wants to know about that. So yeah, Taylor, always great to see you popping up, talking about nerdy things in Office 365. That's where we live in this nerdy world. So, but yeah, this is it. Mostly on over the weekend or on Monday, I will be sending out the recap with the video and the link out to the HLS blog. So it's aka.ms/HLS blog. Super simple. I'm going to drop in our survey so that way you'll have a little bit later on. Just give me a sec while I go get that. I always seem to forget that I've got that, and I'm going to collect some responses and I'll shorten that up. And go ahead and click on the link if you'd like, and you can take a look at that. Matt, I see that Howard asked one more question. Can you answer that? How would SDM interact with non-MS apps? Epic Cerner.
And here I thought I would escape without being asked the hardest question of all. To be frank, the way this is set up, each app would have to integrate with the shared device mode APIs in Microsoft authentication library to take advantage of it. We have not started those, really pressuring our third-party app developers yet to really integrate with those APIs, because it's hard to do that unless like Microsoft has all of their core applications GA, but that'll be the focus of next fiscal. In healthcare, though, the elephant in the room is Epic, right? They have not integrated with Microsoft authentication library, period, right? At least I think that's what I've been told. They use their own authentication thing, and so it'll be a while before we get them on that, and then on shared device mode. So for folks in the healthcare space, that kind of means using partners like Imprivata to help with the sign-in, have that central key vault that manages all of those passwords is probably your best bet to provide a full end-to-end seamless experience. But trust me, folks like myself and others will be hard on the case. We really envision a future where all of this is super integrated, super seamless. And if you have contacts in Epic you can say, hey, go talk to this Matthew character. I'd love to.
We'll force their hand. Any more questions? This is your time if you're thinking of anything. If not, you had an opportunity I put a little bit further up where you can sign up for office hours with Matt and his team for shared device office hours. I think I saw 4 different office hours. Sign up, bring your team, have a watch party, ask a lot of questions, and get engaged with the product group. This is a groundbreaking, amazing opportunity. Don't let it pass you by and your team. So, anything else anyone can think of? All right. Well, on that, I appreciate everybody joining. Thank you so much. Making it a very successful week for you, those who have not seen the other days. You can go out to aka.ms HLS blog and see all of the recordings that we've had for the entire week. So, one last one. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Thomas asks, we have security groups and SO set as prereqs for third-party apps. How is the organization enforcing it for shared devices if they wish to have an app on our devices in the shared device environment? Pressures on them if they want us to buy licensing for their apps off the shelf. Oh, okay, yeah, that's a great comment. Yes. And then for others, using AD security groups or dynamic groups is a great way of managing your devices and app deployments, especially as you deploy shared device mode.
Additionally, I forgot to mention, we've got some cool raffles that we'd be giving away. We've got headsets and pucks and cool sunglasses. So fill out the survey, have an opportunity to win something cool, and we'll ship it off to you. So, yeah. Well, with that, Matthew, thank you very much for joining us today. Behalf of the entire crew, myself, Sarah Dorsch, Jonathan Danowitz, and I'm Jonathan Wynn. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Productivity Summit. Thanks, everybody. Have a great, safe weekend. Uh-oh.
Might have been a misclick.
All right, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks,
Have a good,
everyone.
safe one. Bye-bye.